Hey, welcome back to Prairie Wings Performance. I'm Merl. If you haven't checked out the other parts of this, there are two really good parts leading up to this video. So welcome to part 3. We're working on the 68 El Camino, and we have a pretty sweet engine going back into this thing. So join us, let's get going. So as a rule of thumb, usually what you want to do is you want to have the engine all dressed out before you put it in under the hood. And I'm just going to do it under the hood. There's a couple reasons. One is, well, I guess the main one is the front of these cars are so long that it's hard to get the engine hoist in with how long it is and get it in onto the mounts. I really don't like pulling hoods. So I am going to do my best to not pull the hood on this car. And but if you take a look how close everything is, it's a bit of a balancing act, and so I don't want to deal with all of the accessories, all of the stuff that you normally deal with that are on an engine when you're trying to get her into a car. The story on this thing now, the machine shop pulled this beautiful 383 fresh. He bought the engine that came out as a fresh 383, which is, you know, it's a beautiful deal. Everyone loves the 383. Okay, maybe not everyone. People love 383s. They're a good little motor. Small block, old school, you know. And so he bought this thing. I don't know what he paid. Between $5 and $6 grand, I'd have to look. Actually, I'm gonna post some of the stuff here, the ad and so on, of what he answered to buy this motor. And yeah, I'll put that up on the video. But the whole deal about this is, that's really tragic, is the machine shop pulled this apart, sent me some pictures of it. So it was supposed to be some hot engine built. Turned out it's a junk 350 that someone threw pistons at. Crank was junk in it, never cleaned it up. Machine shop said it really looked like it had eaten a camshaft pretty hard. And so that does a lot of damage inside an engine. And crank, not salvageable. Basically the whole motor was junk. Nothing salvageable on it. So we ended up finding an old school deal, small block again. And what we have here is a 377. So most people know about what a 383 is. So a 383 is basically a 350 with a 400 crank in it. And the 377 is that 400 block with a 350 crank in it. So everyone's going to tell me I need a different chain and a different whatever. Well, pooey on ya. I'm good with what I got going on. And the reason I'm good with what I got going on here is because that chain's on there because I actually have to swing this thing back when I am putting it in, because there is no clearance on my engine hoist to get it under the hood. And again, it is late at night. I picked this motor up today, but I had a car on the hoist, so I finished it up, went and had supper. Then I backed the truck in. I don't want this motor hanging on the hoist overnight. That's why I'm putting it in tonight. And leave the hoist hooked up to it, but she's going to be in the engine bay. Sitting on her mounts. Sure nice having these little motors like this. So I'm gonna leave it sit like that tonight. Tomorrow morning, she's gonna be get her in and get all the accessories on, get the tranny back in, get her back together, buttoned up, and hopefully tomorrow we can make it run. That'd be really sweet. Good morning, had a good sleep. So having the ability to have a designated bench for doing something like this, even though there's been other cars in this bay, this has been sitting here for a few weeks now, but it's all laid out in order. So a few things that we're gonna have to attend to, which we'll get in a bit more detail, is like this was the starter cover, and I'm not putting it back on. I have a new one, so it's a heat shield, but it is literally disgustingly full of oil. Don't need that to be on fire. Other things are the plug wires. Literally they're just, the boots are swelled up from oil. Like this thing had a lot of oil under the hood, so we'll be changing a bunch of stuff like that. But anyway, what I'm going about here is everything's kind of laid out with the bolts and in order. So this sitting on the bench for a few weeks, I mean, yeah, it just does suck, but it's organized well enough that I know the order that I took stuff out. And it's a small block Chevy, so I mean, there's nothing, like I've done so many of them, there's nothing that's incredible, new, whatever. But yeah, it's gonna be easier if you're organized when you take it apart. So going over here now, the engine's sitting in. Normally you dress them up outside, but the issue that we have with that is the clearance for how long the front is with the hoist that I have, but it's not a big deal, or with the engine lift that I have, not a big deal. And the other thing is these headers suck, so this is hanging in here without a tranny, without anything on, and that is the first step, is getting these headers back in. So originally, way back in the day, I believe what started the whole motor change thing was this engine, or the engine that was in here had a bad oil leak, and it's a standard. So originally what happened was the engine got the oil pan gasket changed, the rear main seal changed multiple times. I'm not sure the whole story, but it went through a lot. Never fixed the problem. Turned out when they changed the motor to, I believe the one that was in here that's junk is the oil takeoff for the gauge at the back, the oil port. The fitting was cross-threaded in there, and that's what was causing all the oil leaks. So this motor originally was a 327, probably didn't need to be changed. But why I'm getting there is originally these wires that I just relocated up to these bolts were originally on this pan bolt. Well, the whole thing about this motor, and I told the machine shop, I want this thing sealed up. I don't want it messed with. So they ordered one-piece gaskets in for a small block, and usually this really helps oil leak issues with these things, is putting good gaskets in. So I don't want to take a single bolt out of this motor. All I've done is added bolts where there wasn't any to ground. They didn't have bolts in here. And so those now are added where the grounds are and the support for the starter wire. Now, the other thing is when you're doing this, originally somebody, did the original battery cables and how they're routed. Well, there is a chance the way they were routed that the idler arm here could have swung and hit them. So as you're doing stuff, we could flat rate this and just leave it the way it is, but that's not how this rolls, or I roll. And so I want to take as much time as it takes, quickly to do it properly. And so as you're going along, putting it together, it's worth it so that we don't have problems down the road of tying things up and making it nice and neat. So I left the header loose so I can work on this because, I mean, it's a pain getting in. So that is the new wrap, heat wrap for that starter. So it's a high performance mini starter. And when you put them on, you want to make sure that your band, which is metal, will conduct electricity. Isn't anywhere where it's going to hit that, as well as like this on the inside is insulated, it won't conduct electricity. So you just want to make sure that, you know, the outside of this you can send current through. Just careful when you wrap them up. But how important is it to wrap that around there? Well, these headers kill starters, so we prevented that. I did a short on how to pre-lube pilot bushing. Now this one is pre-lubed, so you can check out how to pre-lube it on a short. But anyway, whoever put this together before, put it in dry. There is a bunch of galling on this shaft. So you take a look, this thing was really hard to get out, coming out. Well, it's because that bushing originally that was in there was wrecked. Like, this bushing ain't going on. So what I have to do is take and clean this up a little bit with a file, make sure that it's in nice shape. And like, I'm not sure if you can see how bad a shape it is, but it is pretty nasty. No wonder this thing took so much to get this transmission out. I thought I was doing something wrong, but I couldn't get that tranny to come out. It took a bit of work. It was like it was stuck in there. Finally it came out. The amount of material that I had to take off, and it seemed like it was all old bushing material. Anyway, I got it filed up and cleaned up really nice, and this new bushing goes on there beautifully. It is super tight. There's no rock to it. It is just beautiful. So make sure you check out how to lube these bushings, because if you don't, you're going to end up with the same problem this guy had. This bushing could go in two ways. If you see, this way doesn't have a chamfer on it, and this way does. This will help you get this put together easier because it has a ramp where that input shaft for the transmission will go. So I have this driver here, and we want to send it home. So that is in there beautifully. And if you notice going in, it wasn't bouncing. When it's in, if you notice, it's got a bounce to it when it gets all the way home. So back when I was apprenticing, one of the guys I apprenticed with, he actually told me, after you have that oilite bushing in and it's all home and it's been pre-lubed, everything, what he always did was, he said, you take this low temp luber plate, which I have here, and you put it in and you try and just get it all in front of that bushing. So my finger is too big to go in there. But anyways, you want to get it all pushed up in front of that bushing. And his theory was, and I don't know, could correct me if I'm wrong, but his theory was, is if this thing does get hot, this luber plate will melt and also lube. So yeah, that's why I did that. So the next thing that we want to look at is, normally there's a dowel in here. There wasn't a dowel in the old motor when I took it out, and there's no dowel in like anywhere for this motor. So we got to remember that these motors are balanced differently. So a 400 crankshaft is balanced externally, and so a 350 is not. And there's a 350 crank in this. So putting the flywheel on, Okay. What I want to do is get it on there, and I'm lining this hole up where the dowel should be. I'm just going to start one bolt. So these bolts, you want to make sure that you've got them nice and clean. Okay. Make sure. And then these are ARP bolts. So clean them up really good. And then I actually use Loctite on the threads and torque them in. The torque specs, I just look up torque specs for small block Chevy, and Summit actually has nice torque specs on their website. So a little dabble do ya, I'm just using blue Loctite. This is Worth brand. You don't need to fill the whole ocean when you're doing this. So this bolt didn't have any on it. Little dab. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to really lightly run these up with an impact, very lightly, and then torque them. Guys, you'll use a flywheel holding tool, whatever, but I'm not doing that. Small block Chevy, if you had the plugs in and everything, it would help you hold it, but it's only 65 foot-pounds of torque on this, so it's not a huge deal to hold. As well, if you're having trouble torquing something like this, if you put the torque wrench up here and you're torquing across center, your leverage is cut down by this much. Whereas if you were to torque down here, having a hard time holding it, your leverage would be increased by this much. So if you are having a hard time holding it, make sure whatever torque you're doing, you're going across center. Easier to hold. So now that you're done putting fingerprints on everything, very important to degrease this 100%. So this was resurfaced, like it's in beautiful shape. We want to make sure that there is no grease or oils. This has got to be dry. Dry. And I should be using gloves when I'm doing this, but yeah, I should do lots of things differently. Maybe I'll get better at it. So I want to do this multiple times with different spots on a rag, clean, make sure she's beautiful. Don't want to risk anything. So new clean rag, I'm just gonna make sure. I'm actually gonna hit that again. Another rag, clean. So. I'm good with that. What we have here is the front of the transmission. So the pilot bushing is right here. We've taken care of all the lube with that. Cleaned these splines really good. They were just gummy, full of grease and oil and whatever. This thing did have oil leak problems, but it was pretty bad. So those were cleaned up. This surface, super cleaned up. Just cleaned everything, and then it's tough to tell on camera, but this is all lubed with dry graphite now. So the very important thing is you don't want this, especially this all gummed up. We're going to use some light lube on here, but I put graphite spray on these spreads or on these splines, and I also did put dry graphite on here. So makes a mark on your finger. Anyways, that's what you want to do. Make sure that this is ready to go in, that everything slides together nicely before you try and fight with it in the car. But bad news is I have to move to putting everything together on the front end of this car. Reason why is, well, I was a dummy. I didn't open and compare the size of clutch. And so I have a new one on order because I ended up with a 10.5-inch instead of an 11-inch clutch. So, oops. Anyway, we will carry on. Thank you for joining us in part 3 of the R&R, the engine in the El Camino, and join us for part 4.